All right, so today we will focus on objects. The only prerequisite for this course is 230, so I've got to assume that and not everybody teaches objects in 230, so I have to assume you don't know objects. So I'm going to teach objects, and that's the topic for the day. So it's no new interfacing today. It's a new sort of behind the scenes. Are there any questions before I get started on the new? So there is, Visual Studio. JavaScript is a pretty old language, and it has an old version of objects, which is sort of not the normal objects, and that's called prototypes. So I'll show you that so that you've seen it. So if you sort of look up examples, anything on the web, you might run across somebody doing the prototype approach. And then I'll show you the more modern class version, which will seem more familiar to you if you've learned objects prior. Okay, so the first one is the prototype version. I'm going to download the zip file. It's in my downloads. I'm going to extract it. And then I'm going to open Visual Studio Code. And I'm going to make sure that then I open the folder to downloads. Okay, because I'm going to use the live server. Soon we will read a file, and then I will definitely want the live server. Out right now, it's just sort of extra. It's just how I'm used to doing things. But if you're using the live server, then you serve when you're pretending your server, you serve up a folder, and so you should open a folder so that you can serve that folder. And if you open a file, you try to use the live server, it will say it's confused. Okay, so here is my a bunch of image files. There is a TTF that is going to be a file for providing fonts. So I have images, I have font files, and I have an HTML. All right, so let's see what this thing does. It has a drop-down list with a list of horror movies, and I got years ago. There's Frankenstein, and it shows you like a movie poster for that movie, and it's ranked at this stage anyway of the top ranked horror movies. Then there is some score. People are giving it an 8 out of 10, and at that stage, how many people voted for it to give it that average of 8 out of 10, and then some description of the movie. Okay, so that's what the interface does. All right, here's the HTML page, some meta tags, some style. So here is me defining this font face. I'm going to call it the bleeding font. That's just me making up a name for it. And then here's where you will find it in the TTF. And so you can, provided you bring along the TTFs with you, you can have any font you want on your web page. Or you can also link up to fonts that are out on the internet. But I brought the TTF sort of along with me. Okay. And then I said that my header used the bleeding font. Okay. And a pound sign means that I am styling based on an ID. So on SPN for me is a span, either SP or SPN is for a span element, but I'm not styling all spans. I'm specifically styling a span with the ID of SPN rank. So this style shows me styling based on the element, the header 1, so all H1 elements. By ID, which uses the pound or hashtag. And then here, these dots are based on class. So if I have elements that have the box class or the wrapper class designated, then they are going to get this styling. And so this whole thing was a grid. So the big whole box was contained in a div of the wrapper type, and then each one of these in between was a div of the box class. And so that's the styling. All right. So there's the div, here's the div, the first div, it spans 2 columns, which you can see that the drop-down list spans 2 columns. Here's a select with nothing in it. So I'm going to add the titles of the movies dynamically. Here's my my second div within the wrapper was the whole thing, the whole grid. Then this is the second div within there, and it is in row 1. And spans 3 rows, and it's in column 3. So that is this over here with like the movie poster in it. And then I had a div, all the rest of them. This one was just a div and a span for the rank. And here's a div and a span for the rating, and another span for the rate number. And the last one was a description, and it spanned 2 columns. So that was here, spanning 2 columns. So this was 2 columns, this was 3 rows, this was 2 columns. Okay. And there's some spans within here. So that was the design. In the script, I am declaring an array for my movies. I'm going to have a sort of a load method that is going to load up the movies and sort of create the list of movies. And then I'm also going to have the click events moving me from one movie to the next or to some other movie. And so I need to know the movies I declared globally. So this is going to be for an array of movies. I haven't gotten the information for the movie, so it's an empty array at this stage. Here is this old style of class. So it's based on the word function. And this is in JavaScript what they'll call a prototype. And the prototype is sort of like the constructor of a class. Okay, and so then you will have, I'm working with a constructor where I know the properties when I make it. And so I'm going to have a rank for the horror movie, a rating, a title, some image file, rating, a rating for the movie, and a description of the movie. And then I just, so that's what comes into this, I'll call it a constructor, but it's this prototype approach. When we're doing the more modern class approach, you'll see the word class. So again, there are 2 ways to do objects in JavaScript. This is the older prototype approach. It's not much, for what I'm going to do today, it's not that much different. Then I use what comes in, and I called it A rank and A rating. And then over here, I am using the keyword this. So that refers to the object that I'm making, and I am assigning its rank to what came in as A rank. Okay. This property here on the right has to match something that was coming in. And then this thing here on the left after the word this is a property of the object I'm making. And that's what you will see. Once the object is made, that's what you'll see. So this A rank is just sort of local to the constructor, whereas these properties here will be, once the object is made, what you will see. You can make them the same. Some people will adopt this style where this is rank and this is rank and this is rank. And that's possible. And if you like that style, that's fine. But it doesn't have to be that way. This has to match this within the constructor. And then this is what you will see once the object is made and you're trying to use it. So anytime later when you want the rank, you will say what some particular horror movie dot rank. Okay. So that's all there is for this prototype, just sort of bringing data together. In this case, the data is all for the yes, some of it could be, it won't be, I'm just displaying the information. If I were allowing the person to add to the ranking, if I had a back end or something like that, and somebody were going to do something with these ratings and rankings, then I may more specifically need them to be known as numbers. But I'm not doing anything that fancy, so I will probably just leave them as strings. Okay. Here's just me saying that I'm going to have a change event for the select movie, and I'm going to have to define a function called choose movie later. Here's all my data. Again, all you need for this course is 230. The number of people have had more than 230, but all I know is, all I can count on you having had is 230. And so not everybody in 230 reads a file. So I'm starting off without reading a file. We will soon read a file, but not yet. Okay. So I just put all of my information in one big long string. So it goes on and on and on. I have two delimiters, two separators. One separates one movie from the next. That is going to be a # or hashtag. So here is the separation between the first movie and the second movie, and there is the hashtag between them. And then there is a second delimiter between the different pieces of information within one movie, and for that I'm using a vertical bar. The delimiters change from time to time. I don't always use the same delimiters. Like people who copy me too closely don't pay attention to, oh, I'm not using the same delimiter I used before. This is the thing that changes. A common delimiter is a comma, but if I have anything like a description, there may be a comma within the description, and then I can't use comma as a delimiter. Okay. So here we are, the method split. I take that, what I call horror data, and I split it on the #, the hashtag, and that creates an array. And that array is just called horror data length. I made horror data. I declared that within this method. Am I in a method or am I not in a method? I'm not in a method. I declared this our data lines as the output when I take our data and I split it. So that gave me an array of movies. Now I'm looping over the movies. In the past, I've shown you like 3 versions of looping over an array. This is sort of the oldest one, just looping, counting up the index from starting at 0, going up to not including the length of the array. I also showed you for each and one other method. I can't remember exactly. Okay, here is me taking the data line. This is now the ith data line. So when I is 0, this is all the information about the first movie, which was, I think, Psycho. And then I split that up on the second delimiter, the vertical bar. And so now I have the different pieces of information for the movie Psycho. And I call that subdata for whatever reason. And so at this stage, subdata is an array. So I have subdata 0, subdata 1, subdata 2. A common mistake people have is confusing how many properties a movie has versus how many movies there are. So make sure you get your indices straight. So our data lines, that length is how many movies there are. Subdata length would be how many properties there are within a movie. Okay. The signature of the constructor is important, that you have to match the order. So up here, I have the rank, the rating, the title, the image, the number, and the description. And that happens to match what I have down here. Psycho was the #1 movie. It had a rating of 8.7. Its title was Psycho. The image is psycho.jpg. The number of raters was this 147,238. And then here's the description. So that order of the data happens to match the order of my constructor. That's not always the case, but I made it the case in this case. And that allows me to use what's called like the spread operator. So I could say, in 98, it's commented out, but I could say I'm making a new, the keyword new says I'm making an object. So I'm going up to my constructor and I'm going to make an object. I'm going to make a movie. I'm going to make an object of the horror movie type. There it is, horror movie. And then I could say, I could put in the properties of my constructor. Subdata square bracket 0, subdata square bracket 1, etc. Because I matched because what comes out of splitting and getting subdata matches the order of my constructor, I can use what's called a spread operator. And I could just say ... subdata. It has to match. If it doesn't match, I've got to put it in the right order. But since it matches, I can use this little shorthand notation. So that's something you can use, but you don't have to use. But to use it, you must have the order. The order of the constructor matters. Again, that's a common thing, is people don't pay attention to the order when they're constructing an object. And so they think that they're using the property that's the image and trying to use it to set the source of an image element. And it's not an image at all because they didn't pay attention to the order. Okay. So there we just looped through the array and instantiated objects of the horror movie type. Okay, here's me grabbing the select. I have a lot of comments of me doing things in different ways. This time I decided to do the for each approach. I'm looping over the array now of movies. I'm creating a new option. I'm getting the text of the option to be the title of the movie. So there's me using the property. Again, I'm looping over an array of objects. So I'm using the dot notation to get a property of the object. So this is a prop. L is my movies is an array of objects. And so L is the ith element. So LEL stands for element. It is an element of the array. And here I'm getting the title property of the ith element. And when I have an array, the most useful thing to use for the value behind the scenes is the index of the array. So I'm just using I, and then I'm adding the option to the select. I want to pretend that when the page starts, that I have chosen a movie. And in this case, I want to pretend that I've chosen the first movie. And so I'm going to what we call dispatch an event or trigger an event. So some languages in JavaScript, they call it dispatch. Other languages, they call it trigger. So sometimes I find myself using that term, but we are dispatching an event. So we're dispatching a change event. So we're pretending that the user chose the first movie. So when I refresh the page, it's as if the user chose Psycho. If I wanted them to choose a different movie, I could set the value of the select to be some other number and then run the dispatch event, and it would be like they chose. If I made it, if I set the value equal to 3, it would be as if they chose the fourth movie, because again, the array indices start at 0. Okay. Here is the function for when they choose the movie. I go to the select, I go to the page, I go to the select, I grab its value, that's an index. My movies is an array. My movies, square bracket, my index is an element of that array, which is an object. And then I use the properties of that object. So the image was the name of an image file. And so I use that to set the src property of the image element on the page. Everything else was some kind of text, and I'm using the inner HTML property of a div or a span, and I'm using the corresponding properties, the description, the rating, the rank, the number rating. The title is already in the drop-down list. Any questions? I'm just going to do the same thing all over again with the more modern version of objects, which uses the keyword class. It's not going to be very much different at all. Okay. We're good with this one. Nobody has questions. Okay. So that was the prototype version. That's me blah, 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 like I just did. Here's the class version. So this is objects from class. That was the prototype. Now here's the class version. I separated out the CSS. Same CSS, but I separated out the JavaScript. I separated, there's going to be 2 JavaScripts. There's going to be a JavaScript for the class, and then code to like use the class. So at this stage, I've separated out the class code, but the HTML still has some JavaScript that uses the class. Okay. I can put the class definition inside the HTML. but I did not. I separated out the class. And in my third and fourth version, I'm going to move all the JavaScript outside of the HTML, other than the link to it. But for right now, I'm making a distinction between the JavaScript class, which is the class, and then the using of the class. And so I'm going to keep the using of the class on the web page, on the HTML page, but I'm going to move the class code out. Okay, so again, the CSS looks the same as it did before. Here in the HTML, there are two scripts. The first script tag is a reference to the class code. I have that first before the other script tag. And so then when I am in the second script tag and refer to the class, it will be understood because it saw the class code first. So the order matters. Okay. So let's look, this is the one that comes first. So let's go look at it. This is the class. It is not as finicky as, say, Java or C. In some languages, you must name the file and the class the exact same name. That's not the case here. So the name of my file is horrormovieclass.js. The name of my class is just horror movie without the word class in it. So we don't have that name requirement. You can use, if you're used to that name requirement, you can have that, but it's not necessary. It's not necessary in JavaScript. But if you're used to it, you like it, certainly you can keep that as a convention, but it's not a requirement. So the whole thing is in a class. So it should remind you, if you've learned classes, of a more usual kind of class. So it's class, then the name of the class, and open curly, and then way at the bottom, the matching closing curly of the class. Then the thing that used to say in the prototype version, the thing that said horror movie is now the constructor and uses the keyword constructor. So here is the constructor and that listing of properties. And you can have none of the properties in the constructor. You can have what's called a trivial constructor. You can have some of the properties in the constructor, or you can have, as we have here, all the properties in the constructor. That's sort of a matter of taste, of like how do you like it. Okay. And this is that same thing again. So what's coming in has to match what's on the right side of these statements, and then what's on the left side of these statements is what we are going to be using once we start using our object. If you want them all to be the same, that's possible. Not a requirement, but it's possible. If you like that style, it's fine by me. My style, I have a style, not much, but I have some style. I have a convention that I usually use, but you can do anything provided it works for the most part. Okay, I added a very silly little method here because I wanted to show that a class can also have a method. In the old prototype version in JavaScript, you can also have methods, but they're a little more cumbersome. So one of the advantages of the more modern class definition of objects within JavaScript to make it align more with other languages like Java, but also to handle adding methods better. And so I just turned, again, some silly thing, and to just have a method, to show a method, I converted a rating, some number, into stars. And so I had 4 stars and 3.5 stars and 3 stars and so on. So I just have some, I didn't do anything clever. I just had this big ass if else if thing and converted it to so many stars. So there's almost assuredly some easier way to do this than this, but I'm more interested in just saying that you can have a method. And this method returns things. Okay, so that is the class. Now we're going to, and that was linked to first, or the first script tag got me the class. And then here's the same, the empty array. I am putting, this is different than what I think I had on the previous one. I'm putting the code where I take the information and break it up and make the thing into the load event. So I said, when the page loads, window, add event listener, load, and here's the anonymous function to handle that. So this, when the page loads, here's what I do. I'm adding a change event. I have my data. I split it on the pound or hashtag. I loop over the data. I split it on the second lines. I instantiate the objects. I instantiate the hard movie objects. Again, I respected the order that I found in my data, so I can use the spread operator ... And so I'm instantiating objects of the horror movie type. You can see that in the keyword new, and then I am making them elements of my horror movie array, or my movies array. Here is me looping through the movies and adding them as options to the drop-down list. So that's pretty much the same. Here's me dispatching a change event. That's pretty much the same. So most of it's the same. It's just more in line with if you've learned other languages, objects and classes and other things. Here's the choose the movie. And I got the index. And the only thing I did differently here was I defined user movie to be the movies with that index. And then I'm just saying user movie here. So, and I made this another function called make stars. So I'm taking, I got the rating and said 5 stars, or sorry, 4 stars, 3.5 stars, 3 stars. And then I decided to work with the Font Awesome site, and they had this is the old one. Let me bring up the new one, open with the live server. They had a font that had full stars and half stars and empty stars. And so I wrote another function to take my rating in terms of stars. I had a rating out of 10. I turned it into a rating out of 4. And then I had another function that turned it into something using Font Awesome to show it pictorially in terms of stars. Okay, so that's what this is. So I am returning some HTML here. This is the HTML for 4 stars. They're all full stars, and then here's a half star. Then I have some like empty stars. So there's a full star, a half star, an empty star. And most of these are high-ranking movies. So I probably didn't have to go all the way down, but I did. All right. So the big change was what? It wasn't that big of a change. We took the word horror movie and we associated it with the word class. Where it used to say horror movie, it now says constructor. So not a big change. But we can also, in this more modern version of objects, have methods. So these objects have both properties and methods. So I have a property like it was rated 8.7. I have a method that will convert that 8.7 into 3.5 stars. Questions? Okay, so it's just, I think in olden days, I used to say, do one of your labs in the prototype and one of your labs in class. And I think I've stopped doing that. Should probably just go straight for the more modern class. But I want you to see prototype in case you see some code out on the internet. There is this older version. Okay, it uses the word function. All right. Almost what I wanted to show you for today. Now, I like to sort of move through levels of sophistication. And so my next level of sophistication is I moved the CSS out of the HTML. I moved the class JavaScript out of the HTML, but I still have some JavaScript in the HTML. So I would like to move all the JavaScript out, but I want the class separate from the using of the class. So I want two JavaScript files and an HTML file and a CSS file. And I'm going to show you two ways of doing that. So most of the code's the same, and just where the JavaScript is what's different. Okay. So here is version 1 with the JavaScript pulled out. This is version A. So it's unzipped, okay. There's the class, there's the prototype, here's version A, there's the CSS pulled out. Here's the class pulled out. So that was already pulled out. Here's the using of the class. Here's the HTML. Okay. So in this version, I have two scripts. And like it was before, so this is just quite similar to what I just showed you like a minute ago, except I pulled the JavaScript out. The using the class, and I pulled that code out into a separate JavaScript. And that's really the only change here. So here is a reference to the horror movie class. And then here's the reference to the code that uses the horror movie class, and the order matters. So that was version 3 is just pull the JavaScript you saw in version 2 out into a second JavaScript file. Remember, if you're taking an approach like this, if you write something with a class and you write the JavaScript code as a separate JS file, then when you email me, you must zip it up. You cannot send me through our email system a bare.js file. You can have JavaScript in an HTML, and the email system lets that through. But if you put a .js file as a sort of a separate attachment into the email system, it's going to block it. And I'm just going to have to send your email back to you and say, I can't grade this. Okay, so zip the things up. Okay. One last version. I didn't like this, that I have one JavaScript file using another, and I decided shouldn't the JavaScript file, the second one that needs the first one, shouldn't it call the JavaScript? So shouldn't the use class JavaScript, shouldn't it call the class rather than the HTML? So that's my last version. It's just a different way in which things are called, not the way that the code runs. So one more version, and then it's your turn. But again, just trying to move you up in levels of sophistication. So in version B, the HTML is only going to call one JavaScript file, and that JavaScript file is going to call the other JavaScript file that it needs. So this is like 99% the same, but one difference then I think is important enough to make. Okay. So here is the code. I want version B. I want, here is the HTML. It is calling use class underscore b.js, and I've added a type. I've given it a type called module. So again, here in the previous version, there were two scripts, and one depended on the other, and I just had to put them in the right order. That was my job, even though as an HTML writer, what the hell do I know about Java? But I had to get the order right. Now I just call one JavaScript thing, use class B. And here's use class B, and it is calling the other one with a statement called import. So again, the HTML called use class underscore b.js. I added the type module, and then that use class B brought in the horror class movie B, although I don't think there's any change to that. Oh no, there was. Export. Didn't start with just class, it said export default. So I'm making it, that is sort of making it available to other JavaScripts. So that made it available to other JavaScripts. Here's the other JavaScript bringing it in. The dot, so import horror movie, which is the name of the class from this file. The dot slash, I hope people who have one of my other courses recognize that when you have a dot, that means the current directory. And so we are looking for a file called horror movie class underscore b.js in the current directory. We might look for it someplace else. We might look for it out on the internet. We might look for it in some folder. We are looking for it in the same folder. Okay. Sometimes when a file refers to another file, you can just, if it refers to just by a name, it knows to look in the current directory. And every once in a while, something looks in other places. And you have to say / to say, no, look in the current directory. Okay, so that's a thing that one sometimes doesn't always need, but sometimes needs. And that's what it's doing here. It's saying, find this class horror movie, find it in the current directory in a file called horror movie class. And that's what I wanted to show you today. Old style prototype class, new, more modern style class. And then if you want to have your two separate files, the third version had two separate JavaScript files, the class and the code that used the class in a kind of straightforward manner. But if you want to sort of do it right, then you do it with modules, and then you need some extra words here and there. But it's, if you played, say with Python loves like modules. So this is JavaScript version of modules. Any questions? I won't make you do modules on exam. It's just there for if you want to push yourself. So what do you have to do? Same thing, pretty much. It's like 90% the same. Okay, so I gave you some head start for some styling. You don't like my styling, or my stylings interfere with you writing JavaScript, then make your own damn page. But I gave you some head start, but if it's getting in your way, then forget it. But I gave you a long string to parse twice. I haven't taught you how to read a file yet, but I will. Populate a drop down with titles of songs. Handle the change event. So when the user changes what song, you're going to change an image. I didn't give you the images, but they're on my website. So add my beginning of my website, and then the title of, and then the image, and that should work to show you the image. You can do the same thing with a lyric file, and that goes into an iframe. And then you're going to embed a file from YouTube, and you use this code, and then you add a YouTube code. And then you're going to, I'm going to say here I'm saying trigger, but we saw that was called dispatch an event. Let me open that with Visual Studio Code for a second. So here is my page. No. Let me open it just this way. Here's my little page. You don't have to style it. If you want to style it, you can style it. If you don't like my page, make your own. I just want to warn you, if you make your own, an iframe has an open and a close. Iframes can be dangerous to add to an HTML page. If you forget to close them, everything that comes after it belongs to the iframe and not just your page. And so all hell breaks loose if you forget to close an iframe. So I have two iframes, and my iframe's open and closed. But if you want to make your own, that's fine. But please close your iframe before. It's a very hard error to find because you're looking in the JavaScript and it's in the HTML, but nothing will work if you don't close your iframe. Questions? No. Get to work. Any question online? I'm going to stop recording.